I'm Christy,
And I'm Kathy.
and this is The Psychic
And the Skeptic. Welcome back to The Psychic and the Skeptic. And on this episode, we are going to discuss psychic detectives. And this is our 26th episode, Christy.
Wow, isn't that like half of a year?
That's exactly half a year. I was going to say, do you know what that means?
Hey, yeah.
We've been at this exactly 6 months now. So thank you again to our listeners who have been with us all the way through. Hopefully, if you're just joining us, you're finding our episodes to be binge-worthy and you're enjoying them over the holiday season, perhaps.
I did start Christmas shopping already.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
ready to get that over with. I'm not going way out this
no.
year.
It feels like one of those at-home, chill-out years.
Yeah, for sure. So I've already got most of that done. Just got a couple more things to buy, and I am through. What about you? Have you started your shopping yet?
Oh, yeah. I think I'm almost done. I really wanted that just done early and then just enjoy the time. Just to go back to basics, family togetherness, appreciation, joy, and everything else that goes along with it. Just
Yeah,
friends
good
and
point.
family, right? Yes.
Yeah, and this time of year, we always try to slow down a little bit when it comes to investigating because people have
busy.
lives,
Yeah.
they've got families with Thanksgiving and Christmas right afterwards. So,
I
and then
think
New
our
Year's.
clients are just too distracted by life to see the ghosts that pass them in the hallway at night.
Although we did get a cool request in,
Oh, okay.
and Becky, who is now back on our team, I know we've talked
Yeah.
about her in the past as having to step away for a little bit, but she's back. So, hey, Becky, if you're listening, shout out to you. But looks like we might be going back to Texas, Kathy.
Nice.
Yep. Are
Yep.
you ready for that?
Oh, yeah. We're fresh a couple of weeks off of a really cool investigation into Mineral Wells, Texas.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was an awesome investigation.
Yes, I can't remember the last time, if ever, we had a clear as day disembodied voice on an investigation.
Yeah, it was humming from a little child and then a female voice. We heard audible whistling. The lights.
Oh,
Remember
yes,
the lights
turned off and on, which I'm still, I can't, it's not our property, so I can't take the walls apart, but I could not find any kind of wiring or a timer. But we did have light in one room turn off when the power was still on to the rest of the building.
I got it on video.
Oh, yeah. So that was
then,
really cool.
Remember the depression, like something sitting on the cot in there in our room?
Yeah, I didn't. Oh, on the pillow you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
one
not
was
just on the
hard.
pillow, but also on the blanket itself. And
Right.
ironically, that was right at the time when the battery charger mysteriously came
Yeah.
out of the wall.
Right.
So
I still think I debunked that one.
no. Then remember the loud, what y'all originally thought was the gunshot, remember? And it
Yeah,
we were all sleeping.
super loud. Early in the morning, sun's already up.
7:21 a.m.
We're all sleeping over this second night. We stayed 2 nights. And we were all woken up by an extremely loud bang at the front door. Or it really sounded more like it was in the foyer. There are security cameras, so nothing came up to the porch. We looked at the security footage. There is nothing that approached the house. So nobody ding-dong ditched or knocked on the door really hard
Right.
and ran. So we're fairly certain that it came from within the house, just based on reviewing our audio recorders too, because we have that sound.
Yeah, and out of 7 of us, 5 of y'all heard it. And then myself
Who are
and
really hard
Brooke,
sleepers.
we are, like I've always said before, I could have a tornado come through and I'm sleeping through
Yeah,
it. It'll
you're
suck me right up.
You're going right to Oz.
Yeah. So that was just a cool investigation all the way through. Yeah. But this
Right.
one, because I digressed, I got off track.
Yeah.
But
No,
Texas,
super cool case, worthy of going off track over.
yes, for sure. But Texas, we'll be coming back to Texas again because we got a cool B&B we're going to be doing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Coming
So,
right
yeah,
up.
Texas. Everything's bigger, even their ghosts.
No comment.
So this is a really exciting topic. This is one
Yes.
that we've talked about a while back when we were pondering doing a podcast in the first place.
Mhm.
Because there's so many interesting stories, or at least roles, that someone with psychic abilities could find themselves doing. And psychic detective work is one of those. Many of you listening have probably heard of a few famous psychic detectives that are out there. Maybe we don't really hear about them as much anymore. They were mainstream media for a little bit, and now that everything's gone to the internet and not so much on live television, more people are watching streaming video. It's not as talked about these days.
Mm.
Maybe people got tired of it, or maybe some of the fraudsters have been discovered and it's put a thorn in the side of the profession, so to speak. But we can talk about it. Lots of different things in this one. So let's start off with a bit of an introduction to psychic detective work.
Yeah. So you know what a psychic is and you know what a detective is. You put it together and what you got.
Right?
You've got a detective that has those extrasensory abilities. So some of these are like those gifts that I've talked about previously when we did that episode on the psychic. You've got those gifts of like clairvoyance and clairaudient. You got remote viewing and mediumship and psychometry and all those different ones. And I think to fully understand what a psychic detective is, you have to understand all the different gifts. And on top of it, you really need to know that not every psychic is the same. We are different, and gifts are used differently. Some have more gifts than others. So
Right.
that's something I want to definitely get into and talk about.
Right, because the public still has a misconception about what a psychic is. And they think that any psychic should be able to pick up on anything at any time. And that's
Yeah.
not necessarily the case. And I've worked a lot with you and other psychics on paranormal investigations. And to me, how I like to describe what I witness is you are all tuning into a different radio station, literally picking up on different frequencies and different waves.
Or the same. Yeah.
Or the same. And I've seen that too, and that's pretty cool. So some topics that we'll get into in this episode are how psychic detectives are commonly used for investigations and solving crimes, what methods are out there to do so, and then how this information is provided to law enforcement. Also, what are the limitations and controversies and why some detectives still consult psychics even today? And this goes back over 100 years in having psychics help out in investigations. So we can briefly talk about where this all comes from in history. And of course, we need to talk about the metaphysical and the scientific analysis. So this topic is easily going to be a two-part for us. I'm pretty sure we're going to go into a second episode on psychic detectives because there's lots of people out there, lots of famous people that maybe some of our listeners have heard of. Or if they haven't heard the name, they definitely have heard of some of the cases that have been solved with the aid of a psychic detective.
And if you are into true crime, you will definitely love this episode.
Yeah, so this will be good for you true crime fans out there.
True crime junkies, here you go.
So psychic detectives are typically consulted when cases go cold. So families are desperate at this point and are requesting additional help.
Yeah.
How does this work? How would you describe how they're able to pick up on facts in a case?
Well, again, different psychics have different gifts, or they may have more than one gift. But just like in that other episode, there's clairvoyant impressions. So this is where psychics can receive visual flashes. They may see a flash of the crime scene or something related, or a flash of what happened to the victim. Sometimes with clairvoyance, they could relive the last few moments of a victim's death. I will tell you, in all my 25 years of working with spirit, I have seen many instances of where spirits will show me how they died, or they'll be in that death state. So this works that same way. A psychic, if they're tuning into this, could actually get how a person died by viewing through their eyes. It's weird because when spirit shows you something like this, you could see it through the person's eyes. So it's like you're looking as this person, or you might see this person off in a distance or see things around this person happening. So you could also get different information on locations This is through vision of words, or you may hear something. And it's not always like full descriptions or a full narrative. You
Because they're
may
like
just have
quick
little snapshots.
photographs or short
Yeah. So picture like a little
video
short
clips.
movie in your head, right? Or
Yeah.
just a quick flash of several pictures. That's how clairvoyance works.
So it can be confusing too, right?
Sure.
So do
Yeah.
you think some people can misinterpret that information?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For an example, and I know we're going to talk about this individual, so I don't want to give too much away, but James von Prague, he was doing a reading one time for a gentleman who lost his wife. And they had been married for 1 year. And on their 1 year anniversary, he gave his wife this locket. And she passed away. And when James was doing this reading for this individual, he saw this woman, and she was like reaching up, touching her neck and around her neck. And James thought she had died from like a broken neck. And he asked the husband, and the husband said, no, no, she didn't die of a broken neck. So what really she was alluding to is that when she was buried, she wasn't buried with the locket that her husband had given her. And she wanted to know where that locket was. It was important. So she was reaching up toward her neck to signify, hey, where's my locket? So yes, to answer your question, yes, it can be very subject to interpretation.
Because they're visual, so you have to interpret the signals and the signs and the images.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle piece, right? You got to
Right.
put the correct pieces together to make a full image.
Right.
And sometimes you only get bits and pieces of it. So then this next gift, you got mediumship, right? Or you've got the spirit communication. So sometimes, as you've seen me, when I'm dealing with spirit and communicating with some, they will give you information. They'll tell you whether or not, this happened to them or whether this is true or not. They'll just give you information. And then they could also give you info on who the perpetrator was. They can give you a
So
mission.
you're talking about people who are past and on the other side
Correct.
speaking to a psychic or a sensitive. So
Yeah.
that's where the word mediumship comes from.
Yes. You're actually in communication with a spirit. So yes.
So do you feel like this happens to you more? You get I feel like or just because we work as an investigative team with the paranormal, with those who've passed. So I feel like mediumship is what happens with you often, as you're getting message from spirit who's passed.
Correct.
Telling you about things going on with a client that we might be visiting and doing an investigation on their home with. So not necessarily a crime scene per se.
Well,
but
wait a second.
But the same thing. Not that we haven't had that happen.
I was going to say, yeah, they could show me something in general, but they could also tell me something. So it just depends upon how they want to get that message over to you, if that makes sense.
So far, your mediumship and your clairvoyance are two gifts that I've seen personally with you. Do you think other psychics have more than one gift or one method of receiving information, like from crime scenes or when they're
absolutely.
investigating?
Oh, yes.
Or do you think there are mediums out there that only have one method? They are only clairvoyant, or they're only able to hear from spirit in mediumship?
Yes.
Okay, so both exist.
Yes. You can have some that have one gift. Maybe they're just clairvoyant. But then maybe you could have another one who's clairvoyant, clairaudient. They can touch objects, psychometry.
That's interesting. Explain what that is.
So remember that residential that we did up in Tulsa? And there was the rifle? First, let me say psychometry is when objects like jewelry, clothing, any sort of personal item that a person has had while they were alive. A person who has the gift of psychometry can hold that object or feel that object, and they can get information from it. They can see quick little visions, or they can feel something. They read the energy of it. There's all sorts of things involved with it.
And this is why we call you the bloodhound, because it's reminding me of you take the shirt of a missing person and you let the dog sniff it, and then they go find them in the woods.
Are you calling me a dog now?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I know it's a bloodhound.
I know we have these pet names. So Ashley's our bulldog on our
Yep.
team, and you are our bloodhound. Right?
So what are you?
Sniffing out. I don't know.
The skeptic.
The skeptic.
So explain the case that we did.
Yes, the
With
Tulsa case.
It's a rifle, right?
It was a residential case. They were a gun collector, so they had someone to display in the home, but the family had mentioned and were concerned that some of the spirit activity in their home was related to one of these rifles that they owned, very historic rifle from a family member who fought in World War I. And there's even blood on the stock left from the German who owned that weapon.
He laid on it, I thought, as he got
He
shot,
had
and that's how the
fallen
blood got
onto
on
it and died and bled on it. So
Mhm.
this family member of the client had retrieved the weapon from the body and pulled it out from underneath him and used it to help him survive the war and brought it home. And now it's just been passed down in their family. But they were concerned that maybe there's spiritual attachment to it. And that was an object of interest for the investigation that night. So naturally, it's an attractive object. You see a gun, most people have some kind of an emotional feeling when you see it. Whether you enjoy guns, you enjoy collecting, whether you hunt, whether you're a police officer, or whether you're afraid of guns, they bring on an emotion. So I have a military background, and we've had some conversations, and you don't know what kind of weapons are what.
Nope.
You would never have picked out that would come from World War I. But you did come up to this object because it was interesting, placed your hand on it, and you pretty much described the story of how this rifle was found.
Yeah.
And you were pretty close in the date of the object. I don't really remember 100% what you said, but it was around about that World War time frame.
And if I recall correctly, I said that it was involved in a war.
Right.
And that it had killed many people. So that's just like an example of how psychometry could work for an individual. Now, when it comes to a psychic detective using these gifts, so they may be brought a piece of their clothing or their jewelry or some sort of personal items, and they would just like hang on to that and feel it for a minute, and they're going to be able to read any residual energy that is left from the victim. They could also get the sense of like emotional states. They might see the environment where the victim was murdered or taken to. They can just overall get any sort of information in.
I could see how the emotional state would be helpful if it's a missing person and we don't know, are they injured, hurt, lost? What is their emotional state? Like, God forbid, a child, scared, lonely if they're by themselves and they're just lost in the woods, or frightened and fearful because they're being threatened, like in a kidnapping. So I can see how the emotions could be helpful from that perspective, I guess. Yeah.
For sure. And here's the sad thing, though. And I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but especially when you deal with children, the sad thing is you can see things through their eyes. And if they don't always know where they're at or what exactly has happened to them, you may not, as a psychic or a psychic detective, you may not get all the needed information that you need to be able to find them. So, for example, I gave the one little story of the one little boy, and he showed me himself in this field, and there were tall grasses, like 4 or 5 feet high, and he wanted me to tell his mom and dad where he was, but yet he couldn't tell me where he was.
He didn't understand.
No, he was only maybe about 4.
That makes perfect sense, that you wouldn't have all the information, yet you'd be tuning in. But it is understandable how some psychics can be called out as fraud by a skeptic in that case, without understanding that we're getting this information from a 4-year-old missing child.
Yes.
And so, you're just not able to pick up on it. You say you have these gifts, yet you don't know where they are. And it's clear and logical from that, but I don't think people really realize that. I mean, it seems obvious, but I don't think that's something that people realize right off the bat when you're dealing with children.
That's correct. And going back to the example that I gave with James von Prague, right? And the lady with the necklace, the locket. So you may get bits and pieces of information, but it's that psychic's job to be able to put those puzzle pieces together. And can you form a clear picture and a picture that is accurate? And that's where you will have a lot of those skeptics and those critics that come in and say, oh, well, you couldn't pinpoint this exactly, or you couldn't whatever. So yeah, personally for me, I would not want to be in the limelight like a lot of these well-known psychics are, because they do face a lot of criticism. Now,
Sure.
yes, they're going to have a lot of praise for people that they've helped, but don't forget, they're also going to have a lot of criticism out there for those naysayers that are just not believers.
Well, and we'll get to the skeptical viewpoint here, but again, I sit here as the open skeptic and the hopeful skeptic. There are assumptions that are made that disprove, but I'm also trying to see it from your point of view, and somebody who's witnessed you and have seen you receive message that I've been able to validate through history. I can see how law enforcement would find this as a worthy tool to at least look into.
And if you had not have seen me in work with my gifts, and some of, like Tammy from our API team, the team that we work with a lot, had you not seen me for these 25 years working, and even her on how her gifts work, would you have believed like you do right now?
Well, again, I'm still partially skeptical. I do think, knowing that there are some things that could be to chance, but I've seen enough to
Make you scratch your head?
Yeah, of course. It does take a stretch to rule some things out as being a coincidence.
Right.
When certain things are spot on, it lessens the opportunity for coincidence to exist.
Oh.
When the details are right there, or
Right.
they've not known a psychic for a good number of years.
That's very true. We have another gift that is known
Yeah.
for psychic detectives. This is the remote viewing. So what this is, people can either look at a photograph and get information, or they just get this image of, like, they can project their mind to this faraway place. They can get geographic features. They can get landmarks like buildings or waterways or woods. They can
So
also
it's almost
get,
not astral projection in a way, or
well, yeah, but no. This
You're
is
not
just your
dreaming,
mind being
yeah.
able to go. It's not really your soul out of body.
so you're getting in on a voice chat or a video call.
Right. Yeah, I guess you could think of it that way. You know, that's a good way to look at it. It would be like doing a
Zoom
voice
call.
Yeah, a voice call or whatever, or you can see things
in.
from different. So for an example of this, I've often talked about our Tulsa case. So the homeowners that were there sent us some pictures, and I saw this little dark-headed girl there, and I knew she was there. I knew what she looked like, and that's why I said, oh, we need to go check this place out. I see this little girl. And then
So
sure
you
enough,
were getting this information not while you were in Tulsa. You were at home in the Oklahoma City metro,
yes, looking at
kind of
pictures.
remote viewing into the
Yeah.
property. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking at pictures on my computer.
Yes.
And I saw this little dark-headed girl. And then come to find out, we recorded some of the best Class A EVP, the All I Want My Din Din and the All Eat It All one. And that was remote viewing. And I've often had people that will send pictures and, hey, what do you get here? What do you get there?
Sure.
I've held objects for people. So back to the psychic detective, it's one of those things where when you have someone who is grieving, they have a loved one that's disappeared or that's murdered or whatever, they want whatever information that they can get to help them locate their loved one or figure out what happened.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure. And with this remote viewing, these are places that they've never been to, but
Correct.
yet they can describe them like they were there yesterday.
Yes. You can see things vivid, or maybe you'll get like a little quick glimpse. So you know that there is a bridge, but maybe you can't describe the bridge.
I've also heard some, and I'm not sure if you would categorize this as remote viewing, but you could give one of these psychic detectives a map of a suspected location of where the missing person may be or where the body may be found. And they describe the area as literally jumping off the page at them. They're drawn to it.
Yes.
But they're not necessarily visualizing it. Is that something similar? How
Yeah,
would
the
you
best way I can describe
gift?
that, yeah, if you were looking at a map, the best way to describe that would be almost like a rush of energy that just points out to a specific area
So
on a
that's
map.
almost like an intuition, like a completely different gift all on its own, right?
Yeah, in a sense, I guess you could say that.
Right. Yeah. That's like really good guessing from the skeptic viewpoint. There's some bias. You're still human as a psychic detective. So my thought with that is you got a missing body. Where are people going to hide bodies? You hear about it on the news all the time. It's always the lake or the pond
Or the wood.
the woods where people aren't going to find the body. Instinctively, we might point to that area of a map. But what are the odds that they get it right every time? Not everybody does. So this is where I think some people who think they may have gifts are claiming to have these gifts and claiming that they can be hired. And then there's others who truly have the gift, and maybe we just don't use the gift enough to our benefit in law enforcement.
And here's my thing. I do believe that if you claim to be psychic and yet you know that you're full of bullcrap, right? And that
Yeah,
you're really not.
Yes, that's an integrity issue right there.
I am not ever going to give out information that is purposely incorrect, because I do believe your gifts can be affected. You have to stay humble. You have to use your gifts in the correct way, because if you don't, there's repercussions. So I'm very careful.
And this is another reason why my position on the paranormal team exists in the historical research and looking for those connections that help validate what you're picking up on. And the more we're able to validate something in the history as being true that you've picked up on without having any background information on a location, I feel over the years it's helped your gift to become stronger.
Oh, sure.
You go in blindly. And so all images that are given to you, you can be confident don't come from your own memory. They could likely be coming from whoever's trying to communicate with you at the time.
Yeah. And I never
so,
know who's going to pop up.
Therefore, it makes it easier for you to interpret the messages as they come in future investigation.
And to trust the information that I'm giving.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
That's why this has worked so well for so long, and why you're able to be clairvoyant. You're able to communicate it through mediumship. You're able to use psychometry, and you can remote view in now, which wasn't something you used to do when we first started working together. I think that was something that was developing for you. We met, you'd been investigating 10 years, but you were still developing your gifts. And I've even seen since then, in the 15 years that I've known you and worked with you, I've even seen that remote viewing as something you use more often, or at least comes out more often.
And the psychometry.
And psychometry was,
with the
that
rifle.
wasn't very common either. And I think that you didn't really have the trust yet in that. Objects weren't really a part of our investigating early on.
Well, I have to say, if I'm pulled to it, I will. If I'm not
Right.
pulled to something, then I won't. That's the difference. So if I go into a location, I'm searching the environment. I'm putting my feelers out there, so to say, and I'm going to see what tags me, what I get a hit on. And if I'm drawn to something and I get that hit on it, then I'm going to go over and I'm going to touch it. I'm going to examine it more. I'm going to feel it. So it just depends on the environment, what I'm pulled to.
And you use that term tagging a lot, and that's, we have our own lingo in paranormal investigating, and I like the term tagging, drawing your attention.
Correct.
And then when we get a hit, it's validated.
There you go. Yeah.
So when it comes to psychic detective work, I feel like the pressure is on even more, because it's open-ended on a paranormal investigation. We're just collecting information, because we're not out there to prove that the haunting exists. We're just trying to gather information that leads us to believing maybe there's a haunting here. And then if so, maybe we get enough information to determine who it is and why they're there and what's going on. But when it comes to an unsolved crime, there's a lot of pressure on that psychic investigator or detective to tune into this specific information. There is a specific person. You don't get to pick and choose which spirits communicate with you, but the psychic detective needs to communicate with that spirit. If it's a crime and a murder and they're deceased, or what I would think would be even harder is if it's a living person that's missing.
But that's
tuning
where
into to energy of somebody who's still living.
that's where your guides can come in and help, though. Your guides
Mediumship.
can give, and those higher powers can give you information that you need to help that living person. So say someone is taken into trafficking or whatever the case may be. They're not necessarily dead, but they're missing. So you can use your guides and you can use that higher power that will actually give you the information that you need to help locate that person or to give you information about them. So it's not always the person who's deceased.
That makes sense. So moving on to law enforcement and when they get involved. And this information needs to be communicated to them. And we've got people in law enforcement trained to use facts in solving cases. None of this is going to hold up in court.
Right.
You can't use feelings and emotions and sensations, or I get an image. We can't see what, so it would never hold up in court as evidence.
Right.
So what happens first is the crime occurs. A person goes missing. The authorities are notified. They try to find this person, and sometimes the body's not found, or they do find a body, but they don't know who did it, and the case goes cold. Families get desperate. Obviously, if family members need that closure, they need to know what happened. They need to know where their loved ones are, especially if we're talking about children or minors. So how does the psychic then get involved? So normally the consultation can come from whoever makes the recommendation. So it could be a family member. There's some famous cases out there where family was desperate to find out the answers, and so they'd heard about some psychic detectives from previous cases, or they have friends who are aware. Sometimes there are law enforcement officers that have worked with psychic detectives previously, and they see this case going cold and they've had success in the past, so they call up their psychic friends and
Call me now for your free reading.
and they obtain a consult. So there are detectives that are very skeptical over this, and so they're not going to go and pull up the internet and search for your local psychic detective. But if they do find one, usually there's an added step there in looking for references, and many of them are going to be of other law enforcement. So one law enforcement officer is more likely to believe another law enforcement officer who uses a psychic and then recommends use of this person. That's going to help a skeptic to be open to maybe giving it a try and seeing what they get out of it. So, but more commonly, families contact psychics and then they submit tips to police from there. This could be a written or a verbal report, sometimes sketches or written statements, location descriptions, symbolic impressions, using the clairvoyance that you described. Some create detailed maps or drawings, so they get this image and they just write it down. But the family member may come to this consultation and bring watch or jewelry or a shirt or a favorite stuffed animal if it's a child, or a toy, and that psychic can then use psychometry to see what kind of images they get. After this consult, they might be invited to go to the crime scene to see if they get any more information,
Or look at pictures.
They might remote in, using that remote viewing, or they might even go to the victim's home to be around other objects to see if they can get a clearer picture of what's going on. This can offer real-time impressions while the officers observe. And sometimes there are things that are said that the psychic would not have known. They don't know the family member. There's no clear connection between them. But law enforcement clearly can't submit it to court as evidence, but they'll use it as an anonymous tip that could potentially lead to information or not. So law enforcement can receive hundreds and even up to thousands of tips if it's a nationally known case. Any lead is worth checking out, especially once the case has gone cold and they've eliminated all other possibilities.
Yeah. You can look and you can find psychics who have been used repeatedly to help in all sorts of law enforcement cases.
But see, anything that they pick up on is rarely ever used as primary evidence. It always has to be independently verified, but it could at least give them a new lead, a new direction to go
Yeah.
that they might not have even considered. Why not get as many people who can help as possible?
And I know we're going to talk about one in particular, that a psychic detective that helped out in Arizona, Allison Dubois.
Yes,
And
she's pretty well known.
she is. And there was also the TV show called Medium.
Right, I remember that. Early to mid 2000s.
Yes, Patricia
Arquette.
Yeah, she's the one that played Allison Dubois. So I know we'll get more into that, but yeah, so they didn't come out and say, oh, well, Allison's the one that helped us solve this case. She was just the person behind the scenes that would give information.
So some of the controversy that can come from having a psychic investigator, it can be helpful and it can be harmful in the sense that when it comes to the relationship with the family, especially in high profile cases, psychics can be very comforting. It almost may give them hope that there could be a location or a closure, whether the body is found or whether they're even found alive. And some people feel that could be seen as false hope, and it could be harmful to their emotions. But I don't know. That's an ethical dilemma, I guess. But me personally, I would think, why would you want to lose hope? Hope should always be there until you have all the answers.
Yeah, for sure.
And if it gives the family something to live for each day in their grief, to wake up and keep fighting the fight and keep searching for their loved ones, why not keep trying?
Yeah.
I think it can only be emotionally harmful if this then takes over their lives or affects their relationships with other family members. Say there's more than one child has gone missing, the second child or third or other children in the family could then be neglected with all this attention going to finding this person. Mm-hmm. Whether you believe, whether you're a skeptic on psychic detectives or not, is there some kind of ethical dilemma in creating this false hope for people?
But can you imagine what that family experiences if their loved one is found and found alive? Oh my gosh. And even not alive, they still have that closure that they need, and how grateful they would feel. I've done readings for people in the past too that have questions about suicide. And so, yes, this is a warning.
Trigger warning.
A trigger
for a
warning,
topic.
yes. But I've had people that want to know, hey, did my loved one truly commit suicide or were they murdered? And so I'm able most times to give them the information that they need and give them some closure.
The key there is the truth, though.
Yes.
If the truth is known. But it can't necessarily be proven just off a psychic impression alone. It still needs to be validated. So I think that's where the dilemma comes from, is when it isn't validated and discovered. There are some cases where we'll never know if something is suicide or not. And that we want desperately to provide closure for families when we may never really get the answers, at least in this physical plane.
Right.
And myself
right.
as a nurse, professionally, we have the ethics of veracity. We need to be truthful. We don't lie to our patients or clients, and we're open if we're not sure, but we can give an educated guess, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that if psychic detectives give this disclaimer, this is an image I get, take it for what it's worth. It's the same thing we do with our clients as paranormal investigators.
Right.
We say, hey, we have this strange audio recording, or Christy picked up on this spirit. This is what we experienced. Take it for what it's worth.
Yeah.
So whether that somebody chooses to believe what has been discovered, again, it's always good if we can validate it and get that physical proof.
And there's a lot of times where I may get something and I want to be able to do something with that information. So, for example, I know you've heard me talk about the Nakoma Park case. And with Nakoma Park, that's where I saw Mark. I knew Mark was murdered by that girl, Alicia, who had the infatuation with him. And I knew where she had even buried the knife at. And I contacted the Nakoma Park Police Department, and they verified that there was a homicide that had taken place there. back in August of 1977. Everything was on paper back then. Nothing was on computer, unfortunately. But like, I wanted to go dig up that knife.
Yeah.
To
Still
turn it
eats
in.
at you.
Yes.
Comes up a
Still
lot.
bothers me to this day, but it's just information like that.
Right.
So can you find a murder weapon? Can you find a body? Do you know what happened? All that
Closure
is
is
so...
certain in so many different things, even again on a medical case, or the time when I've helped at a car accident on the side of the road and the victim had lost consciousness, had been talking to me one minute and then they weren't talking, and EMS arrives just at that moment and I hand over care, and I never get closure. I never found out, was he okay? Did
they make it?
Did he have severe injuries? And you just have to accept the unknown sometimes. And that's difficult.
It can be, yes.
Yes. So some more of the limitations and controversies, the risk of false leads and wasting time. But again, these are the cold cases. This is where all leads have been crossed off at this point. So if there are new leads, they may end up being false, but that's better than no leads at all.
Well, that would be the same as the police putting their phone number out there for any and all tips. And so they got all these calls that come in, and the calls lead nowhere.
The big issue is the finances, the wasted resources.
Yes.
In stumbling upon something. And there was a case that I had read about once where the law enforcement was convinced the murder had happened at 11 p.m. and a psychic said, no, it was 3 a.m. And they ruled out a suspect based on his polygraph testing. He'd passed with one of the best polygraph technicians. And the issue was they were asking about 11 p.m. so he could truthfully answer that as in that he was not there and did not kill this person at 11 p.m. because in fact it actually was 3 a.m. So of course he's going to pass even though he's still the perpetrator, if that makes any sense. So even having the incorrect information can lead people down the wrong path and eliminate suspects. But a psychic in that case insisted on the 3 a.m. and then once all the information came back from the autopsy, they were able to verify the time of death was around 3 a.m. Yeah. And then they were able to go back in and re-question this suspect, and eventually it led to his arrest.
But polygraphs are not admissible in court anyway.
Either. So if we're going to use that tool
right
to help us, and again, these tools are pointing us in certain directions. So what is a wasted resource? That could be an opinion.
A polygraph test.
Or a polygraph, not the psychic. So, and sometimes it can be distracting. So the information can create, again, that emotional distress to families, creating that false hope. Some success can be attributed to intuition or cold reading, as they say, using general statements. They're out in the woods. Oh, we found them in the woods. So sometimes if you want to believe it bad enough, you can believe that this person is validating the answers to a crime.
To me, that's not success, though. That's just a bunch of bull malarkey.
But I say that all the time about paranormal investigating. Anyone can prove anything's a haunting. It's when you try to disprove that you find the most credible evidence.
Which is true.
So, let's see.
But can psychics really be helpful? Yes. I truly believe that they can. You can be a psychic detective or just a psychic, whatever you want to call it. But I believe that if you have true gifts and you're able to, I think that you could really be beneficial when it comes to trying to solve crimes.
So then the dilemma here is for law enforcement, like when they're interviewing or when they're in the consultation phase, how they can establish trust that this psychic is onto something, or that checking their references, have they been validated? Was it by chance or general statements or good observational skills of some random person, or are they truly getting some kind of message from the deceased or a vision of the crime itself? And that brings us to History time. I really just want to go over the timeline of when psychic detectives started out working with law enforcement, or at least when they started working on cases. So as far back as what we could find is the 19th century. So this is around the 1840s all the way up into the 1890s. As we know, spiritualism was growing at this time in the US and in the UK. And mediums and seance leaders were regularly claiming information about missing people and murders. And sometimes it was the family that was seeking them out. This was a time when government law enforcement agencies or city, county law enforcement really wasn't a thing. Anytime there was a crime, it would be a private investigator that would come and investigate to solve what happened. Now, police existed, but they weren't really doing crime scene investigation. So naturally, a family would hire either some private investigator, or if that wasn't working and they knew of a psychic medium or a seance leader, they might also hire them to see what they could find.
Do you think religion played a fact as far as like back in this timeline, if they wanted to hire someone like a psychic to come in?
Sure. Potentially, except there's some Christian faiths that think that psychic mediums should be avoided
Right.
because they think that any message they're getting is a false message from evil or the
The devil.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if they had to keep it on the download hush back then.
Yeah, who knows? Some people might have been spiritualists then, or maybe leaned a little towards pagan beliefs or other religious faiths. But I do know that if you wanted your crime solved, the police wasn't doing it. So you would probably seek out anybody who could help. Obviously, because of this, police were rarely documenting any formal cooperation of these mediums. In the early 20th century, so we're talking about 1900, about 1930s, there were public celebrity mediums. So people were finding a way to make money. And this attracted private citizens to seek their help in criminal manners, but police, again, did not publicly credit them if they seemingly helped to solve a crime. So that continued on even further into the 1940s and the 1960s. But this is when our country was at war with World War II. So disappearances and the missing was a common thing. So wartime mysteries was a great arena for psychic detectives to do their work. And then in the 1960s and the 70s, psychics began to be treated as sources of anonymous tips, but again, wasn't considered a primary source of evidence in any case.
Yeah, because you can't really prove, like you said
Right,
earlier, what a psychic
I can't
is
see
getting.
what you're seeing. We can't capture that image and share it. So 1980s is when we were watching a lot of the talk shows and things like that. We're starting to get popular, but there was a case called the Atlanta child murders that drew a lot of psychic tips. So this could have been a lot of phone calls saying that they knew who the killer was, and it created a lot to go through for investigators. And so this is the first time they were publicly criticizing the volume and low quality of these leads. So many of these leads led to nothing. So it could have just been wishful thinking of people, or somebody had a strange dream and they thought maybe they were psychic and would just call in a tip. So they just got overwhelmed. So maybe the word was out and everybody just thought they could solve a crime because they'd heard about previous psychics and they wanted to be one too. But again, law enforcement endorsement really only occurred in a couple of localized cases where maybe there were only a few tips that helped them to then lead to solving that case.
And the Atlanta child murders was a very interesting case. So it basically, without going into a lot of details, between like 1979 and 1981, this killer was targeting primarily African American children, adolescents, and young adults. There were like 28 people that were killed during this 2-year period, and a majority of those were boys. So I could see why they wanted an influx of psychic help.
Well, it wasn't that they were requesting it, is that all the tips were coming in from the parent psychics. So and they weren't asking for these tips, they just got them and they led to nothing. So it
Gotcha.
really started that skepticism. And I think maybe just the people who called in had heard about psychics having the ability to solve crimes, so then everybody had a tip to share and it didn't lead them anywhere. So it created that skeptical mindset and lack of trust from law enforcement. So in the 1990s, local law enforcement were saying that some psychic impressions seemed helpful, but they were usually anecdotal and not corroborated by court records or a systematic study.
Of course.
And then in the 2000s, we had court TV and cable television, or an A&E series called Psychic Detectives that came out, and that was pretty popular. That show premiered in 2003. But this created more awareness and brought multiple police psychic collaborations to mainstream television. So it was a documentary style format, but the problem with it is that they did not independently verify the psychic's claims in this television show.
I remember watching that.
Me too.
When I was a kid.
Yeah. Interesting stories, fun, definitely for entertainment at the minimum, but it helps cement the public image of the psychic detective while not resolving the question of accuracy. So now we're looking at the 2010s and up to 2020. We have more documentaries and investigative journalism where they've re-examined cases where investigators credit intuition or psychics, often finding that any success was ambiguous or the result of conventional police work. So you get the tip, and then the police then follow up and, oh, it was great police work that found it. They just so happened to have a good guess on where to go to check things out. So I'm helping you out there with this one, leaning towards the psychic rather than the skeptic. I would say in some cases, if somebody had something really specific and the police didn't even go there, it gives them a tip, a new area to go look. And it's coincidence or not, the case is solved.
Right.
So we're now into the 2020s, and we have a rise of online psychic messaging.
Call me now for your free reading.
What was her name?
Miss Cleo.
Yes, Miss Cleo. So
those commercials used to come on TV like all the time back then.
Right.
And so that her saying just gets ingrained in your head. Yes.
Now we can post messages and post these readings online publicly for others to read. So law enforcement continues to state that there has been no case that is scientifically validated as being solved because of a psychic ability.
Wouldn't they even, you think they'd really even admit that, though?
It depends on which media you're looking at. So some media will say there's never been a case that has been proven. But you can easily say that if you've never read one that has. And you can say, well, I've never read one. So have we truly solved any cases with a psychic ability? But maybe we were pointed in the right direction. And I would say that helped solve a case. Yeah. Whether it was a good guess or not, that's to be left up to you to decide.
No such things as always coincidence. You know what I mean?
I know there's far too many of them out there to be a coincidence.
Oh, I know. I can't wait for us to do part 2. I'm going to jump in there and get after it.
So basically, to wrap things up, we've got the metaphysical claims and all the different gifts that you mentioned. And of course, the scientific assessment, which always looks at evidence and repetition in the evidence. Are you able to go back to it? The argument is that there's a lack of replicable mechanism, meaning controlled studies in parapsychology that still have not produced consistent, independent evidence that psychic abilities reliably function above just chance.
Coincidence.
Right. Yes. Well, you can say that for everything. It's a coincidence that gravity pulls me down the stairs.
Or is it a coincidence that I pushed you?
Right.
Whoopsie.
Common alternative explanations for apparent hits is one thing that is part of the scientific assessment. So that was the cold reading, confirmation bias, coincidence we just discussed, and investigative contamination, which is unverified tips that mix with established evidence and appear to have contributed when they did not. So again, lots of just guessing. And anyway, there's operational problems in policing. So psychic tips often produce many false leads, consuming resources. Police usually treat psychic input as unvetted tips and require independent corroboration before acting. And then case audits and documented failures. Those are the high-profile public errors. We have a few that have had some pretty big errors that are well known, which we can talk about. And there are some skeptics that show the potential harm of relying on psychic claims in criminal investigations. I am an open skeptic here. I know a couple of people who have some really good gifts. Looking
you.
at you, Christy.
I know. Thank you.
So it can't always be just a coincidence. Coincidences don't occur that often.
Right.
Now, I would say there's probably some people who wish that they could possess these type of gifts. Everybody would love to help solve crimes, right? We're all sleuths and we love a good mystery. We're all crime junkies here, right?
Oh, yeah. And even on paranormal investigations, you take someone new along if you're trying them out for a team or whatever, and no gifts. After going on a few investigations, they're now suddenly full-blown psychic.
Which is, if it's an actual gift and a real thing, I would feel like any talent or gift, it takes exercise and training and experience to really develop. We all have our own intuition, spidey senses, which we all can't deny that. But we're talking about people with fine-tuned gifts that lead to actual results.
Yeah, and when we get into part 2, we can actually start talking about some of these well-known psychics and the cases that they actually worked and what happened.
There's several out there. We could probably do a few episodes. Tune in next week for some of these famous cases that you've probably heard of, and some maybe you didn't even know a psychic was involved in the investigation to help solve these notable crimes.
Write into us and let us know. Are you a psychic detective? Have you actually helped solve a crime or anything like that? Just write in and let us know your thoughts.
Or if you've ever experienced any kind of crime seen from a dream or a vision that you were confused about. Perhaps you have a really good story we can share on the podcast. And you can share your own parastories, topic suggestions, and comments to psychicandskeptic, all spelled out, @gmail.com. So you can find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts, and thank you for listening.
Because the paranormal is the normal.
Not yet understood.